Hello and Happy New Year to all my YouTube friends, Wiccans, Pagans, Readers, Diviners, and General Misfits. Today what I thought I would do is my annual tarot reading, kind of my year at a glance, my 2020 overview, and take you along for the ride. So let's see what the cards have to say together, shall we? This is a reading I do at the start of every year. I usually try to do it like January 1st, January 2nd. This year we had some excitement. On this past Saturday, January 4th, we moved my roommate in. So you will meet him soon, hopefully. So I'm a couple days behind. But it's January 8th. I feel like that's, we've still got a good chunk of the year to go. So skipping that one little week won't do us much harm. The spread is not super inventive. It's not terribly creative, but it's something that I really like, and it works for me. So feel free to use it, adapt it, change it, however you want to do that. There are 12 cards and 12 months of the year, see? I promised you no difficult math. So this is how I arrange them. You could do in a circle, like a clock solitaire for 12 cards, or you could do 2 rows of 6 or whatever. I group it this way because I guess I tend to think of things in quarters. It's probably a symptom of working in business for the past 13 years. So, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, and I bet you can't guess where I'm going with this. October, November, December. Or put another way, right? The top row is winter, the second row is spring, we got the third row for summer, and then finally the last row for fall. So either way, however you slice and dice it, it kind of gives you an overview for the year. Now, I am of the general belief that the further in advance that you read, kind of the less accurate things will be, because there are so many mitigating circumstances, so many things that can kind of change and shift and move around during the course of the year. So what I have found in the past few years is that, the earlier months, or the closer I do the reading, the more accurate it is, and the further out you go, the more variables can be introduced into the equation. So I think that's a general rule, and, as always, your mileage may vary, right? So let's just take a minute, take a peek, see what we see. The first thing that jumps out at me when I look at the overview of these cards is there are so many pentacles and so many cups. So lots of information about love or maybe emotions, and lots of information about finances and stability. No swords at all, which is kind of crazy, right? If you're going by the rules of standard distribution, which I could do a whole video about, because I actually love probability and fractions and things of that nature. It's kind of the only branch of mathematics that really interests me. But it's wild to think that there are no swords in a 12-card reading. That's unusual, right? And my friend Deborah likes to say, absence is as significant as presence. So, no swords and only 2 wands, or rods, they're called in this deck. This is the Morgan Greer, and it is, I guess, probably my second favorite out of all the decks I've ever owned. And 2 majors, and only 1 court card, which is also kind of unusual. But that's okay, because to be perfectly honest, I don't like the court cards. They tend to frustrate me. I never know if they're supposed to be literal people, if they're supposed to be... They drive me nuts. If I could remove those 16 cards from the deck and throw them out my window, I would. Maybe I will. There are no rules, right? So, what I've kind of taken from this... if we go, like I said, by quarter or by season... So because we're kind of moving around and looking at all the cards, and back at me, and back at the whole spread, and then back at individual cards, I don't have my phone propped up on anything. So I'm going to hope that the iPhone 11 has some decent image stabilization in there and that I'm not shaking around on you too much, giving you some motion sickness, Blair Witch style. But this is the winter. This is January, February, March. And if I had to kind of assign those cards one word each, I guess I would say tradition, balance, and fulfillment. The Hierophant tells me that if I want to accomplish my goals in 2020, of which I have several, I'm going to have to start off the year with a real healthy dose of discipline. I'm not a very disciplined person. A lot of the time. So I kind of really take that as a sign that, you know, if I'm going to do what I need to do this year, I really have to take it seriously, and I have to, you know, kind of respect the institutions to which I have committed myself, and really just kind of buckle down. Again, that's not something that's really come easy to me historically, and in the past I've had trouble with balance, and I can hit the gas pretty hard, and then I crash, and then just give up, and then I go back and forth. So I'm really kind of heartened to see that February's card, you know, talks about that balancing act. And then by March, to kind of have that balance and harmony and fulfillment, kind of tells me that by the end of winter, by the time, you know, spring equinox comes around in the end of that month, you know, maybe I'll have figured that out and kind of hit that really nice stride where I'm starting to make progress on all of the things that I've kind of saddled myself with this year. Good things, I promise you. But you know, still taking on quite a lot. So that kind of tells me that in the beginning, you know, it's going to feel like boot camp, but I'm going to figure out a way to do it in a healthy and sane manner. What's nice about this is in February, actually, I will hit my 1-year anniversary of going to therapy, which has been a real balm and a real blessing. And I probably wouldn't be able to do half the things, more than half. I wouldn't be able to do a significant number of the things I'm thinking about doing this year if I did not have that help, and I'm grateful for it every day. So it looks like the year is off to a strong start. And then I find my footing and I hit my groove by the spring equinox. The spring really speaks of kind of just harmony. Harmony in all things with all people, and harmony with nature, and just kind of continuing from where we left off in March. You know, those rainbows, those good vibes. Again, if I had to sum up these cards with like one-word phrases, I would say victory, alignment, and maybe innocence. You know, in April, that kind of like triumphant riding in on the white horse, you know, with that laurel wreath, is a really positive and uplifting card. And the Lovers, to me, never really signified like a romantic human relationship, but I always thought of that card as more again like a synthesis of the self, you know, whether that's resolving your male and female sides of yourself, that polarity within those kind of masculine and feminine energies, which is a huge theme in my life right now as I continue to explore my gender identity. But yeah, but more than that, just kind of being at peace with oneself and kind of having that inner harmony, that inner alignment. And again, I think it's kind of interesting that the Lovers is right between the Two of Pentacles, because there we have that balance again, you know, kind of that symbiosis of, you know, not being the authoritarian, the disciplinarian, the bad cop all the time, and not being hedonistic and giving yourself over to pleasure and just goofing off all the time either. So that's kind of interesting to me that those kind of wound up in the same column. And the Six of Cups for June, I'm not 100% sure what to make of that. I do find it interesting. There's a male and a female pictured on this card, and then there's a much younger male and female pictured on that card, and they are both kind of like in a loving pose. You know, this is obviously a much more adult, kind of sensual pose, but this is, you know, there's physical contact there as he hands her the cup. There's obvious affection there. There's a relationship of some sort there, whether it's family or, kids or puppy love or siblings or whatever. And really, really interesting that there's white flowers in both too. Um, yeah, the Six of Cups is a tricky one for me. I know a lot of people relate that card back to childhood. I didn't have like a super peppy, happy, innocent, easy childhood, so that doesn't really speak to me. Yeah, that one's really curious, but again, I think there's probably a lot of purity and a lot of harmony, and it looks like I am making a good pace on my goals. Like I said, riding in on that triumphant parade mount there, and finding that harmony, that balance, and keeping it moving, and being grateful for all of life's little blessings, and stopping to smell the roses and whatnot. So the first 6 months of the year look like a really beautiful, really beautiful 2020. Summer looks a little trickier. A lot of people don't like the Eight of Cups. I've never had a problem with that card. To me, that always looks like kind of a card of, like a spiritual journey, kind of a turning away from the world and worldliness and worldly goods and everyday cares, and really turning within and analyzing what's going on inside of yourself, spiritually speaking, meditating, contemplation. So a lot of people view it as a negative card, but I don't. I find the Eight of Cups actually really peaceful. And if I had to come up with like a one-word kind of term for each of these cards, in July, contemplation; in August, loss; and in September, courage. So that's kind of intimidating to me, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not sure what the loss is going to be in August, but in that way that tarot does, I doubt that it's a literal loss. It's probably something more along the lines of loss of my direction, or a loss of confidence, or a loss of my sense of self that was driving me forward. And how funny that in September I seem to have this shining moment again, where looks like maybe I regain that courage, or I regain that confidence. September seems to be a bolstering month. It's also my birth month, so that's cool. And then to me, the fall and winter kind of, I'm sorry, why do I keep saying that? The summer and fall are kind of telling the same message. God, more cups, more pentacles, more pentacles. If I had one word terms for these, they would be in October, pleasure; November, conservatism or conservation maybe; and December, learning. And kind of what these all tell me together is I have a lot of financial anxiety, and not all of it is really rooted in reality. The Five of Pentacles really speaks to, yes, there's loss, there's injury, there's grief, there's some sort of, some tragedy, but also there's help available, right? The church is lit up from within, and it's warm and it's welcoming, and the assistance exists, but the figures on the card don't see that in the moment, in their grief and their trauma. They cannot see the assistance that's available to them. In that way, it kind of reminds me of the Four of Cups. But, similarly, you've got the Four of Pentacles, and my dude is just so scared of losing what he has accumulated and what he's gathered to himself, that he can't leave his castle, he can't leave his treasure unguarded, he can't go enjoy his life, because he's so busy keeping everything under wraps and keeping everything under such a tight watch all the time. So, in reality, and again, just like above, how funny that these two seem to be in the same column, there's help available to them, but they don't see it. He has plenty. He doesn't have to be worried about it. He can turn his back on those coins. They aren't going anywhere. And it's the fear and the anxiety and the grief that are holding these figures back. It's not fixed in reality at all. The reality of the situation is there's probably plenty of prosperity. There's plenty of, pleasure. There's plenty of good food and good drink and a good roof over your head. So I don't quite know what to make of that. And then again, and the learning, in December, the year wraps up with, kind of this lesson of like, yeah, you're good. You've still got a little ways to go before mastery, but you are making this progress. Like, look at you, killing this stonemason work, just absolutely slaying it, girl. So when I look at this reading, and give you a little bit of specific more background of the things that I'm trying to accomplish this year, I think it is worth mentioning that I am planning a massive career change. Now, I haven't said too much about it, except to some close friends, but it does involve going back to school. And I've kind of been nervous about that because there are times when my job is emotionally or spiritually unfulfilling and mentally not stimulating, but it's pretty lucrative and I have excellent benefits. So for the past couple of years, I've kind of excused that job from not really challenging me and not really meeting some of my other needs, just because it paid really well and, it gave me all sorts of perks and I've been kind of content to just coast. And this is the year I decided I'm going to make a change. Now that change involves going back to school. It is a complete change in direction. It's not anything like what I have done in the past. So with that, comes a lot of worries and fears and anxieties of how am I going to pay for school? If I go to school full time, am I going to have to demote myself, take a lower position, take a pay cut? Am I going to be able to support myself if I take a pay cut? Should I, what am I going to have to do differently? What lifestyle changes am I going to have to make? I had wanted to travel this year. Am I going to have to kind of curtail some of that and cut out some trips and some treats that I was really looking forward to? And again, so I find that interesting when we talk about discipline, when we talk about balance, when we talk about harmony, when we talk about learning, going back to school, when we talk about financial conservatism and prosperity and turning away from everything you've known to go in a new direction. The reading is really, I think it speaks to that, and I would be very surprised if it didn't, because that's a huge thing on my mind. Like I said, if there's one thing I want to accomplish in 2020, that's what it is. Even if I don't finish school this year, and in fact that would almost be impossible, because of the program I'm looking into is just over a year long. So even though I can't finish school, which is probably why the Three of Pentacles is here and not the Ten of Pentacles, right? I really, really want to get that ball rolling this year. I just have a lot of, fears and anxieties kind of holding me back. So that's really interesting to me how that showed up in this reading. Again, there are still some cards tripping me up. But on the whole, I'm really looking forward to 2020. I know I didn't get super specific with that reading. I tend to, like I said, it's kind of hard to look at a whole year at a glance. Like, that's not super specific. If it was a whole reading about, school and career this year, or love and relationships this year, or whatever, I may have been able to extract some information. But hey, like I said, I took some notes, and it's enough for me to kind of have that overview for now, and to check back later on in the year, to look at my notes, rewatch this video, whatever, and see, not if I was right, but just kind of how that manifested. Because it's not a question to me that these energies and these symbols and these cards will show up for me. It's just a matter of how. And like I said, it's tarot reading and divination is far less about being right than it is just kind of giving you an insight, into yourself and into what energies are surrounding you and what energies are available to help you. The other thing I was going to say, not by way of disclaimer, but kind of just as an FYI, maybe you relate, is I am not as confident about reading for myself as I am for reading for other people, and I'm not even super confident about reading for other people. But when it comes to reading for myself, I feel like I get stuck in this trap of like either seeing exactly what I want to see and it's wishful thinking, or at the far end of the other spectrum, kind of just seeing all my worst fears and gloom and doom and tragedy everywhere and worst case scenario. Thanks, depression. So, I find it quite challenging to read for myself, and that's part of the reason I was like, fuck it, we'll do it live. That I would share this reading with you guys and as a way to kind of push past, that edge of my comfort zone. If you can relate, if you also find it challenging to read for yourself, there's a book I really, really recommend. It's called Tarot for One by Ms. Courtney Weber Hoover. Tarot for One is an incredible book. I can't say enough good things about it. And it gives you really, really helpful tips and tricks for, obviously for reading for yourself, right? Like the name implies, but also just about the tarot in general. One of my favorite parts is where Courtney goes through and assigns like a pop culture character or moment for every member of the major arcana, and that tickles me. It's a great book overall. Tarot for One. Again, highly recommend. And the other book I really highly recommend for tarot, you heard me mention my friend Deborah before, Tarot Interactions by Deborah Lipp. Also incredible. This is where I learned when I had mentioned before about standard distribution, right? Like how to tell if a higher than normal amount of any particular suit has shown up in your reading and what that might mean. How to tell if, a higher than normal percentage of court cards or whatever, or, different symbols and colors, and then just how the cards relate to each other, where they're positioned, or any of the figures looking at figures in other cards, reading the whole thing as one cohesive storyboard and not like card by card by card. And she was the one who was also talking about, absence is as important as presence. It's not just about what shows up in your reading, but what didn't make an appearance at all, because that's just as significant. So again, Tarot Interactions by Deborah Lipp, exactly what it sounds like. It's about how the cards all relate to each other in a reading, because, you may not be a tarot card alone or something like that. So if you have seen something different in my spread, I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you've done your own divination for 2020, I'd love to hear about your methods in the comments. If there's any other types of content you'd like to see in the future, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. I pretty much would love to hear anything you have to say to me in the comments. I hope your 2020 is off to a phenomenal start, and I'll see you soon.